Well, good morning, good afternoon. I'd like to welcome everyone to our cyber webinar series, which is brought to you in collaboration with the AIB's Teaching and Education SIG. We very much appreciate this collaboration with the AIB's Teaching Education SIG, and this is another one in our series. I'm Professor Tamer Çavuşgil. We're glad to bring you this yet another helpful seminar on teaching, on pedagogy from Atlanta, Georgia. If this is your first time attending our webinars, which started last April 2020, and we've now ran some 40 plus webinars, welcome. If you have been attending previous ones, definitely come back. So today's topic is very interesting. Before I get into that, I just want to mention that this is also brought to you by the Cyber Consortium, which includes 9 other centers of excellence in international business, designated as centers of excellence in international business by the federal government, and reside in leading business schools in the United States. So this webinar and others in the series are recorded. You will be able to receive, you'll be able to view this later on. In fact, after the webinar itself, you'll receive an email and with further instructions. And when you exit the webinar at the end of our 1 hour today, there will be a short survey with 5 quick questions. Please do respond to that. We need your input, your suggestions for future webinars. I should also mention that everyone except the panelists is muted in the webinar. So do post your questions and answers in the Q&A function. And if you have a question about the program itself or having difficulty, use the chat function. So we will leave about 10 minutes at the end for some questions and answers and final thoughts from our speakers. And by the way, everyone who's attending this webinar will receive, together with the email, some handouts provided by Professor Charles Dadarash. So with that, let me just talk a little about today's topic, which is virtual learning, a new reality since last year, something we had to quickly learn and try to get better and better. And today's topic, I think, is very helpful in that effort. So Professor Charles Dadarash is our speaker, and he'll talk to us about the 3 E's: experience, energy, and engagement of our students, which are big challenges, correct? So let me just say a few things about our distinguished moderator first, and then introduce Charles. Our moderator in this joint cyber AIB TNA SIG is, of course, Dr. Osrin Shlenskite. We're very glad to have you back here, Osrin. Good afternoon to you. I know it's late in the day for you. Osrin is a university teacher and also the vice chair of the communications group at the AIB Teaching and Education SIG. She teaches various topics related to international management. She teaches at undergrad, master's level, as well as professionals in continuous education. She serves as a digital mentor, supporting teachers in the adoption of new technologies, something that we all need, and innovative teaching methods for online education. Osrin has earned her PhD from the University of Vaasa in Finland, and she does research on strategy implementation and global virtual work in multinational corporations, and published in various outlets, including critical thinking, critical perspectives in international business. So thanks again, Osrin, for moderating this session, this conversation with Charles. So Charles, of course, is a distinguished scholar. We're very happy to feature you, Charles, this morning. Charles is the Kanathi Endowed Chair in Teaching Excellence and a professor and chair of the management department at the Daniels College of Business, University of Denver. Charles moved to West, I guess, relatively recently. He has taught previously at IMD in Switzerland and the Fox School of Business, Temple University, and Kelly School of Business. His research focuses on strategy and leadership in a global context. He's written and published widely, and I should mention that he has written over 50 cases, several of which have received international awards. He has many accolades. Among them, he is an elected fellow of the Academy of International Business. He teaches in multiple programs, worked with several global organizations. And Charles, I know that you have a background in mechanical engineering from IIT Madras in India, and master's in robotics and an MBA. And of course, I met you first when you were a doctoral student at the Ivy Business School in Canada, and worked with good people there. And I know also you worked in industry before you started in academia, and in particular, you have experience with the Tata Group in India. So with that, welcome to you, Charles, and looking forward to our conversation here. And thank you, Austin, for moderating this discussion.
Austin, thank you for inviting, and Tamer, what a gracious introduction. I still remember the first day joining the doctoral program, reading your paper on internationalization, and in fact, my first paper was on how what do you call the exporting of Canadian versus U.S. Exporters. So I heavily leaned on what you had done, and working with Paul Beamish, he said, "Hey, look at Tamer's paper, and you can learn everything." So that's how I started my career in international business. So thank you, Tamer. And Austin, thank you again, because you have done a phenomenal job bringing this teaching to the forefront of academy. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you both.
Yeah, so go ahead, Austin.
No, just wanted to thank you both. I mean, it's an honor to work with your team, and in general with GSU-CIBER team. It's amazing experience, and we're honored that we could have this collaboration together. So thank you for making it happen.
Thank you. So as you can see, I think we put those two questions: what is challenging and what is satisfying? And if this is one of those heavy pulls we are pulled into, right? On the one hand, the virtual learning offers so much of flexibility. I mean, you can bring speakers. I mean, I can have speaker from Lithuania, from Michigan, from all over the world. Perhaps once we get all the satellites set up, we can even bring somebody from the moon, isn't it? So that's the flexibility that we have, and you can have breakout rooms. But at the same time, we are also sort of constantly plagued with this what do you call this? The vague feeling inside you are, am I speaking to the ether space? Is anyone listening to me? Or really, am I contributing to their learning, right? So that's a tussle that we are feeling. And that's what I wanted to pull through. I remember somewhere in April, I had already considered moving back to the west, to join Denver. And I got a call from my executive and MBA professor. He said, "Hey, Charles, I have a problem. We have to launch this EMBA. We have 20 executives signed up, and COVID is letting us not able to offer anything in person. And we are committed to do 3-day, full day, and now we have to move into online. So can you help us with that?" That's how I got started into this, right? I mean, I have run this online programs to some extent, like, okay, asynchronous learning in Indiana, we started with that. but to run 3 days, did you get me? 3 days nonstop and 8 hours a day, right? So that was something which I thought was a challenging one, and I started working on it, and we ended up learning a lot, both my students and myself. In fact, in spite of the fact that I had moved on to Denver, the class that I taught is so connected with me. Now I'm like, how on earth is it possible that you can work so much for 3 days online with a group and they're so connected to you? And that's what got me into this journey, my friends. I think we all, I mean, you can see from the type of responses we are getting on the chat, engagement is a problem, and energy, we may not recognize it, it is a problem. And then experience is what we are fundamentally after, is experience, and that is a problem, right? And that's something I want to address. In fact, I was just imagine with me, if you can you imagine Plato and Aristotle are walking into your classroom today, right? And you are taking them on a tour to demonstrate how greatly the learning technologies have changed since their time, right? You take Plato around and then go and show him this, and he says, hey, what's that big thing, glass stuff that you have? Oh, that's called an LCD screen. It can do this magic, this magic, this magic, and you pull up all your participants on the screen, and they're all on the screen. And then Plato looks at you and says, well, it essentially is an eyeball to eyeball learning, isn't it? You get what I'm trying to say, right? Eyeball to eyeball learning. Yes, in spite of all the stuff that we have gone through, it's an eyeball to eyeball learning, right? And that's where I want to start from. In fact, one of my good friend Curtis, he wrote a book some time back, and he was writing like, a lot of time we think technology can solve everything, but technology, yeah, it can aid you, but it doesn't solve you, right? Solve the problem. And Joshua from MIT, he wrote a book. He said, trying to assume technology will totally transform our learning is trying to assume you can put a rocket on a butterfly wings. Can you imagine that? I have a sketch, sort of picture for you, right? It doesn't help, right? So fundamentally, we recognize learning is a social process. It's a social process. You are involved, your students are involved, the context is involved. And remember, we all agreed to this. Student is at the driver's seat. You and I can stand upside down, but the movement has to be triggered by your student. We may be the horsepower in the car or in the automobile, but the driver has to operate it to get to where he wants to go. And that's the challenge that we are confronted with, right? So in spite of all the technological facilities that we are offered, how do we really bring that learning to happen? And that's the challenge that we are dealing with. And that's where I want to say, like, okay, once we recognize it's a social process, and then we say, okay, how do we develop this? How do we deploy the technology to the benefit of the social process, right? And that's where we sort of start looking at how do we get this, right? The fundamental tension we feel as teachers is, I have so much that I know, right? And you walk into the classroom and you can just spill over so much of knowledge and stuff. You have it and you can throw it in, right? But what you and I know very well is knowledge in its own, it doesn't produce much, right? In fact, I like the metaphor of a pine cone. And for some of you, most of us may have seen, in fact, I got to see a pine cone after I moved to North America. And I didn't realize until late in my hiking experience that the pine cone has a few seeds when you open it up, right? And that's what I want you to think about. Our knowledge embedded in experience has a better shelf life, right? It's not about eyeball to eyeball learning or going what it calls uh, piping down the knowledge that you know to the students. It's about embedding that knowledge in some experiential reality for the student so that it sustains, and over time that the student can keep it and multiply, right? And if you really want to create an effect, That's what is we are confronted with. And to create that experience, that's where the struggle comes for us, right? I mean, as you see, a lot of these challenges that we are talking about is about engagement and all the difficulties. It's about fundamentally, how do we create that experience, right? And that's what I call, like, all of us have experienced. You sit in a concert hall, and that experience is phenomenal, isn't it? Right? And the same music you can hear in your room, you can get the best of the audio. It doesn't provide that emotional experience, right? To some extent, in fact, it was Michael, uh, one of the guy who used to sing in such a way that audience literally cried during the concert, right? So you can create huge emotional impact in a in a concert hall. And many of us have experienced it in the classroom. I mean, we run these case study discussions, and you can literally see some of those professors walking up and down the hallway and just bouncing it through. And the classroom is laughing. The classroom is tension is there. Like, there is so much of drama going on in the classroom, and we can sense it, right? So what we really have is, it's not just the audio that is going on. I mean, the professor's voice or the student's voice. There is so much of what I call psychosocial dynamics that is happening within the classroom, right? And that's a challenge for us. How do we replicate that emotional connect in our virtual media, right? And that's what we have to think in terms of, how do we bring about that connections, right? I'll tell you, the when I started this virtual class this semester, getting the students to switch on the video was a problem, right? I mean, you can say, the given all the freedom regulations and stuff, you can't mandate, right? You could, I mean, one way to do it is, if your video is off, I'm not going to give you a participation grade. That's one way to think about. But oftentimes that doesn't work. I mean, even if the students are putting on the video, they can switch off their attention, right? How do we get them to come in through, right? So one of the things, in fact, three sessions into the class. This is I'm talking about the winter semester. The COVID is so much raging, and students are not coming to the classroom. They're all in their pockets, and getting them to talk about. And I'm teaching strategic management. How do you bring emotions in a strategy class? Think about it, right? So in fact, one morning I walked in and I said, okay, guys, for a moment, I want you to talk about how you're feeling. Nothing else, right? So for the for the next 3 minutes, I'm going to put you into 2x2s. Just go and talk to each other. How are you feeling today? And just come back, and then we'll continue the class. So I mean, in the Zoom, you have this beautiful way of creating arbitrary breakout groups. All you need to do is, if you know the number of your participants, divide by 2, and you create that many rooms, automatically it splits them into 2x2s. When they came back, everybody had their video on. How do you explain it? Right? Everybody had their video on, and then I asked a few students, can they talk about some of what they heard? Not your experience, but what you heard about other person's experience. It opened up, just things moved smoothly, right? So to me, what really taught me was, students have to feel connected. And if you can create that connection, you can make a lot of things. Can I try something with you? I assume you're all sitting, most of us are sitting, some of us may be standing. Like, the camera is not on, not many of us can see each other. So what I would suggest, would you mind just standing up for a minute, just for 30 seconds, right? Just stand up together with me, if you don't mind. Just stand up and just stretch yourself. Yeah, and you have the slide is on. Let me switch off the slide for a moment, and you can see everybody else on the gallery view, if you have the gallery view, right? So you can stretch yourself, sit down, and then now let's sit down together. Just 30 seconds. We got up, we moved out, and we got back in. Can that do something? Did you feel anything? Can I get some panelists to text? What did you feel about just getting up and standing up and coming back? Austin, why don't you give me a clue?
Yes, actually, if you would like to say a few words in the chat, how did you feel? I could immediately refer. Yes, refreshed. There is one comment from Fatima. Thank you, Fatima. So Fatima felt refreshed, Mona Lisa relaxed, and then Cheryl were more energized.
That's,
Right.
I mean, a simple thing like that. Thank you, Austin. Really appreciate
Awake.
it. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you all
And
for
just,
joining.
yeah, thank you. And that's what I'm telling my friends. I mean, when we are getting into our classroom, we are so much what I call chained by the need to drive content. I want you to recognize there is a trade-off. Content comes much more powerful when you have some emotions. So to some extent, you have to unfreeze the class so that they can get ready to take the message that you are giving. And if we don't connect to them where they are, it's very hard for them to connect to us so that we can get them to bring everything. And you have to remember context, colors, everything. I walk into the classroom today, for example, let's assume I'm teaching international business and I'm going to teach them about the, what you call the trade-off between local responsiveness and global integration. I have a beautiful model. Let's assume a beautiful case. I walk into the classroom and my student is like coming in, his grandfather has just passed away or his siblings are in the hospital and they walk in and sure they are sitting in the classroom, their body is there. Even in a virtual classroom, they are switching on the camera or they are just signed in. Unless we address where they are, it's very hard for us to move that, right? What we have in our classroom, you think about what you typically do in a classroom. You walk in, you put on you set up your computer, everything, and you walk around. You walk around the room, you just shake hands and stuff. And what is the equivalent of that in your virtual class? You have to think about it. So how do you create? I mean, I put the word concert hall effect just to give it a sort of a visual image for you. You walk in and you sort of switch on your computer and you are ready to go to the class and ask yourself, how can I bring the concert hall effect into this classroom? And the best way you can think about is, yes, for a moment, I'm going to make a trade-off from the content to the emotion. Okay. Last week we had a session for our faculty here. I brought in an expert from Google. We talked about having fun in the classroom. I mean, one thing is to have a serious one to emotional stuff. The other part is just to have fun in the classroom. So maybe can we think about like if I had you all on the camera, I would say, hey, what will be the most funniest background you can bring in, right? And in the Zoom, what you can do is you can go and put on some what I call you can put on a mustache or you can put on some hat, right? We literally did it about 4 weeks into the class this semester, right? I mean, I had the same problem, like students struggling to get their video on and stuff, right? So we said, okay, for tomorrow's class, I'm going to create what I call a virtual background. And here is the virtual background. Take it and use it, right? And then once they get the hang of virtual backgrounds and they start putting one lady started putting her ribbons on the head, another guy started putting the hat and the mustache, everybody had fun. Now suddenly for me it was like, oh my god, what's happening here? And the moment I had to sort of sit back and say, it's okay, let it go, right? Once it went on, students feel at ease, they come on together and come back to the classroom. So think about it. The message I want to give is context colors everything. Always think about content without emotion is very hard to get through. And think about it. At the end of the day, my goal is to drive knowledge, but I have to embed it in the experience. If students don't experience what I'm saying, it's not going to stay for too long. And that's what we just did, my friends. Yeah. Okay. Star Wars Day, I had that's a good one. In fact, Angela just mentioned Star Wars Day. I had a Star Wars background with you. That's a great one. In fact, for the case that you are teaching, you can have dynamic backgrounds. So you can, for every class, you can create a background. And in one of the class, I had a background contest. Like we had all different backgrounds, and we voted for the best background. So learn to have fun, and you can have a great experience in the classroom, and you can literally recreate, because we all recognize the advantage of virtuality, but the one that we struggle with this engagement experience. So I wanted to think about it, right? That's part one. When we go to the next one, right? Now we all are touching on this, and then you can see this engagement is the common theme that is coming from all the expressions that we have had, right? And quite often, this complaint about, I think Mona Lisa is saying, hey, students are saying, I have internet connectivity issue. They don't switch the camera on because of that, right? Now, you have to recognize there, like quite often we think bandwidth is a problem. And if they switch on the video, the bandwidth consumption is going to be too high, and therefore we discourage bandwidth usage. Now, Zoom is the one of the biggest advantage in Zoom is that the bandwidth consumption using video is very minimal, right? Now, to be sure, your high quality audio takes as much as bandwidth than as much as your video. So it's a misnomer, or sort of not valid thinking to say the video is going to be a problem. Internet connectivity is a problem. I mean, most of the time it is an issue where students are in a dorm where they have to share the internet with multiple users. So those may be a problems, but in that instance, they are also going to have audio problems. You have to recognize that. So one of the things, in fact, partly from the concert hall effect, if you can think about it, in order for your students to be engaged, it's not sufficient that I have all the audio stuff. I mean, in my room, I have my big screen, and I have nice backdrop, and I have an audio phone and stuff. If you want to replicate good experience for your students, you have to share that with them. You have to get them to go in advance. For example, I show my students what my setup is. I just take just a cell phone and sort of show them what my video setup is. And I tell them, okay, I have my Macintosh computer to drive my lecture, but I also have a small side screen. Now, the 24-inch screens now today cost less than $200. So sometimes in many students' mind, this might be an expensive one, but once they see the real cost, they may loosen down. So to some extent, Mona Lisa, one of the issue we have to address is how do we help students to create a space and a particular setup for them to sign up. Just having a laptop and click in, click on, click go is an insufficient mode, and slowly getting them to think through that would be a wonderful one. Okay. The second part I want to go is engagement. Now we all recognize it. It's the heart of learning. How do we get there? Right. Now you ask yourself, do students want to learn? Right? At the heart, it goes to that particular question. If you believe your students don't want to learn, you can do anything. Whether you can be in the classroom and the same problem, right? So what we are dealing with is my student wants to learn, but he has certain inhibitions or certain potential issues that are blocking him or her from learning, right? So it is with that philosophy I would approach how do we engage them, how do we increase the engagement, right? And that sometimes you may have to sit back and talk to them. Hey, what can we do about it? Uh, I did have a conversation. Second day in my virtual learning class, I said, friends, I have a problem. I would like to teach, but if you're not, I don't know what you are getting. So what can we do about it? And the student says, maybe Charles, you should have something to engage, right? Now, would you mind, I want to ask you to come here. I have a, would you mind just clicking on that and you will go to a Jamboard? right? If you are in a computer, if you are able to do, you can go to this one, right? And and just try to see, why do students now, what do you think is holding back students from engagement? What do you think is holding back students from engagement? Right now, if you want to respond to that, all you need is, there is a very simple one. There is a sticky note feature there. If you click that, and you can add a line or two, just 2 or 3 words, the same way you put it in your chat box.
We have a comment, Charles, that it says for some participants that there are too many people viewing the Jambot, and sort of there is limited access.
For a moment, don't worry about it. Like, I just want to demonstrate what is possible, right? This is one type of technology that you can use, right? Okay, now you can see, now let me put it on the screen, then you can see what others are doing. You can see, right? We are now in a class of 140 people. And what I can do is, there are multiple pages here. If I had planned a little bit more time for this, I can get you all into different screens and they can all work. In a class of 50, for example, I can create 10 pages and assign each group to one page. For example, I would say I'm teaching about, let's say, Porter's generic strategies, 4 different strategies. I would create one simple Jamboard skeleton, and I will ask them to go to one particular stuff and divide them into 4 groups, and each group is going to do something. And then once they do something, they come back and report, right? So this is the problem. I mean, one of the questions that you had an issue here. For example, when I put them in breakout, but I don't know what they are going to do. Now as you are watching it now, I can show you what you can do. For example, let's say we had 3 different groups, and you can sit in your room or in your terminal, and you can watch what's happening to the different groups. You can see that? So, Ashwin, can you see this?
Yes, absolutely, yes.
Right?
You can see that.
So if your group 2 is not doing anything, you can walk into the group 2's room and say, exactly, guys, what are you doing? Right? So this is one of the technologies. So you have so many technologies available like this, right? We are using the poll. We are using some of the, you can create a cloud word. For example, if I had asked you to talk about what is holding up the engagement, we can create what we call a cloud, word cloud, right? So if you go to poll everywhere type of technology, you can use that and then say, hey, could you put one word each? And one word each becomes, you can create a cloud, and you can create a class cloud and say, oh, this is what we are doing. And if 20 people are saying one particular word, that word cloud will exaggerate it. So in real time, you can show what students are thinking and how they are doing, right? So engage. So the fundamental, the principle that you want to create is, how do you avoid the bystander effect? Like, this is what I want you to think about, right? Engagement is fundamentally about, Mentimeter can do it. Thank you, Luis. That's a good one. Mentimeter, there are quite a few technologies, right? So once you sign into the concept that this can be done and students want to engage, and it's about helping them to overcome the inhibitions and helping them to build up the technology or build up the process, you can do multiple things. You can do multiple things. Now, in psychology, we are all familiar with this. Like, this is one. Like, I mean, when students feel like they are a bystander, they don't get into the action. They don't get into the action. And that's where we sort of say, how do we help them to feel part and parcel of it, right? Why am I asking you to do all this as a one? I mean, I don't want you to feel a bystander. Every one of you matter. Karen matters, Austin matters, Luis matters, right? So once we get to that point, then we can do amazing things. So engagement is possible. It is not because students don't want to engage, but because students have problems, right? Getting them over the inhibitions. Does my voice matter? Why am I calling on people and telling them Mona Lisa and names? Because that you make them make them recognize, yeah, you recognize them. I'm not just one among that 25 students or 50 students in the classroom, just a name on the screen, but I am an individual, I matter, right? Once we get them to that thinking, getting over the bystander effect, you can do amazing things. And slowly you can even turn over the control to the students, right? Just imagine yesterday's class I had. In fact, we have a series of 1 hour sessions with my students. I want them to think about strategic thinking. I gave them a book of HBR series on strategic thinking, and the class divides into 5 different groups, and each group takes 3 or 4 articles and teaches the class what the article is all about, what they are, and they are supposed to create an exercise where the whole class will engage, right? I have done this about 3 weeks now, and I'm like, oh my God, I am learning something, right? So to some extent, you want your students feel a part and parcel of the learning process and that they are in the driver's seat. And that can get you a long way, right? And in the process, what you have to recognize is less is more, less is more, less is more, less is more, right? Because we are so much sometimes handicapped, or to some extent what I say, we think so much about the content. We have a syllabus to finish, we want to finish everything on time, and in the 50 minutes class or 45 minutes class or a 2 hour class or 3 hour class, we are imprisoned by the content. Can you give yourself a break? Think about it. Content absent experience is not sustainable. So if you can get 80% of your content sustainable rather than losing 100% of the content, you are better off with going with 80%. So keep that in mind and you can go a long way. And remember, every participant is one of a kind, one of a kind. What virtual learning allows you to do is build on that. So once you understand certain students' personalities, you can tune it to them. You can tune it to them. In fact, as you are giving the lecture, you can send a message to a Rachel or to Louise and say, hey, can you look at it, right? So it allows you to address each person one by one, and that's the fun and the joy of learning, right? And then let me go to the last one, energy, right? How do you keep the energy? How do you keep the energy, right? Energy in the classroom is generated. You have to remember, like, if you are, and it begins with you, right? I put this magnetic resonometer as a think point because I walk into the classroom, and if I am not energetic, my students drop off, right? Because when you see your students coming in, they have so many things to go. Literally, your students are perhaps signing off one class and signing into another class, right? So they're running from one screen to another screen. And how do you get them to come through, right? So you have to find your source of energy, and you have to learn how to draw energy from your students, right? And it is not like what I call a zero-sum process, right? It's like the magnetic resonometer, like you create and the students generate more energy, and from the students' energy, you draw on it, and it goes both ways, and you can build it back and forth, right? And that's where you want to ask, okay, what can I do to build that energy? What can I do to build that energy? In fact, the simple exercise that we did, standing up and walking. And in fact, when we walked in, Paula was playing that beautiful music. Okay, sometimes playing a beautiful music and then getting them to have some fun with the backdrop. All these are interesting stuff to lose the energy, right? To create energy, right? So once you have an idea, where do you want to end? In fact, my goal was to give you this four simple nuggets, not profound, the simple nuggets that can transform the classroom, right? You walk in, you have to have an end in mind. You have to have an end in mind. And with that end, you begin the class, right? You begin the class. Hey, class, today we're going to do this. And this is how it ties from our last class. And this is where we want to end. By the time we end, we want to create something. And that's what you want to go at, right? And to me, like I say, every class is an opportunity for us to learn. Every class is an opportunity for us to learn. And that's how you can drive it, right? And what are the tools you have? What are the tools you have? Simple. Think about it. Like, a lot of the time we focus so much on how we teach in the classroom, how we dress up, how we do this and stuff, right? You think about it, 50% of your classroom accomplishment is dependent on design, right? So think about it and give some time, choreograph your class. You start thinking like Steven Spielberg. What should be my act one, play one, act two, act three? How do you, in order to end there, what do I need to do one by one, right? So design is important, and that's where I want to. I mean, most of us are not intuitively drawn to design. We just end up, we'll go and manage it in the classroom. We spend so much time on the delivery, but we don't spend enough time on the design. In the delivery part, think about what I call presence, right? You need to connect. I mean, I hope I am demonstrating it, my friends. And I'm saying like, I have this phrase, what I call, I learned it from one of the professors at Duke, viewing the dance from the balcony, right? When we are teaching, we are thinking, think about it as a dance. We are in the dance floor teaching. But once in a while, you have to get off the dance floor and sort of saying, like, imagine yourself standing on the balcony and watching the dance, right? You need to be able to, like, if we get too much engrossed with what we are doing, we don't know what's happening, right? So you keep your chat screen open, and you are sort of saying, okay, how do we, is the class going? And if you're seeing energy going down, it's time to stop and give a break. If you see some confusion in the minds and then some chatter going on, you need to stop and think. So think about it. A part of the classroom in the virtual, the same thing what we would do in a real classroom is getting a sense of where the movement is, right? And I can see, okay, now there is the chat questions are coming in, so I need to probably stop. So I need to go and towards a stop point. One thing I cannot address in this short span of time is the assessment, right? A lot of us are still stuck with our age-old thinking. Okay, now what do we do now? We put a camera on the student, and then we sort of monitor how he or she does the multiple choice or the essay question. We have to ask ourselves, what's the next stage of innovation? What's the next stage of innovation in assessment? And in the fundamental philosophy is, if the student is in the driver's seat, how do we turn over the ownership of learning to the student? And not by what you call the guillotine of assessment, but how do we make assessment as a what do you call it, as an experience for our students to understand where they are. So that's where I want to bring the plane to a final landing. So as we move along, I mean, journey to mastery takes time, and I think we have to be willing to work. We experience and give feedback. Invite people to your classroom as you teach. Get somebody to come in and observe and provide you a feedback. And have a mentor. If you are in the early stage, be a mentor. Go and sit in somebody's classroom and observe them, and then constantly experiment. Right? I still experiment. Some experiments bomb, but that's okay. Right? So you have to be able to work through it and say, journey to the mastery is a series of things that I have to do and work through it. And finally, friends, this is where I want to end. You know, this the engagement. If you just purely look at engagement, we don't go anywhere. Look at it as a composite of engagement comes out of energy, and engagement drives experience. And when students are experiencing something, they create energy, and that in turn creates engagement. And you can see this virtuous cycle. And that's what we want to create in the classroom. Okay. With that, I will end, and I'll hand it over to Asreen, and we can do Q&A.
Excellent. Before Austrian, if I can share some feedback too. Charles, this is outstanding. This is really the reason why we bring people like Charles, to inspire each other and to learn from each other's experiences. I tell young colleagues and my doctoral students exactly what you said. Go and sit in somebody's class. I mean, then we have normal face-to-face, or in online class these days, and just learn about their style, their approach, the tools that they're using. You offer so many tools and so many ways of engaging the students to bring hooking the students, giving them a hook to become interested in the subject matter and be active rather than be passive bystander. And I liked your suggestion to get on the dance floor. don't watch the dance from the balcony, but actually do get on the dance floor. I mean, that's what we're trying to do. I like your idea of engagement over content. So many cases, I mean, early in my own career, I was just rushing through the material, thinking that I had to cover the entire 25 chapters in the book. And by the way, in those days, we had 30 plus chapters in typical textbooks, and you were rushing. Little did I realize that students were not internalizing. They were not digesting. They were not learning. And they certainly couldn't, if they didn't capture it, they certainly did not remember it, recall it later on. So I think you can sacrifice on the content just to make sure that they're getting it, they're digesting it, they're internalizing it, and they'll be able to apply and use it, recall it later on. But there's so much to be said about learning from each other. And you showed us here, I think, just another demonstration of that principle. So much to share and cross-fertilize and inspire from each other. So thank you. There's a lot of good comments there, as you can see, lots of good suggestions, and people being familiar with some of the apps and some of the tools as well, like Padlet. Somebody said, oh, Padlet is also available. Yes, this is why we're doing these webinars, so that we can share best practices. With that, let me turn it to Osrin.
Thank you, Tamir. Charles, we are energized. We feel your drive. That was fantastic. So absolutely, thank you. You demonstrated what you meant. So really, thanks a million. And really, without further ado, we have a lot of great questions. So let's jump right into them. There was a concern, like, because we're still living a little bit in a face-to-face class mindset. First few steps, transferring your mindset and your thinking from face-to-face classroom to online classroom. What would be that very basic things that the teacher could do?
Yeah. So in fact, how to adapt face-to-face to the online. And that's the challenge. It's 80% of us facing that, right? Now, what happens, I mean, I would say what not to do, right? What not to do, and then I will go what to do, right? What not to do is, don't assume that same thing you have to package and do it the same way you will do it, right? For example, I'll tell you, like, I have 10 cases to be taught in that section, and then I take the first case, I walk into the classroom, I would typically say, so, okay, can somebody start with this, what the case is all about? And then I look around in the classroom and somebody say 7 or 8 hands are up, and I say, okay, you go, Austin, right? And I try to do the same thing in the virtual. And what do I do? Like, okay, who would like to start? No response. Anybody? No response. Anybody? No response. And so that's what we have to say, right? Yeah. So what we recognize is, number one, choreographing, right? That's what I could say, choreographing, right? Because in the moment you get into the virtual screen, you imagine the bystander effect kicking in, right? Everybody is thinking somebody will do it and nobody will do it, right? So unless you have an orchestrated manner. So the simplest way to do it is, okay, you just, you have a class, this 10 class sequence, and you say, the case 1 is going to be group 1. So I want, you can literally say, Asrin, get us started. What do you think about it, right? So to some extent, getting them started would be a good one. Or you just ask, you start with the poll. For example, okay, how many of you would think that this decision maker should do this decision, right? So the way you start the class is important, and you have to ask yourself, how do I choreograph that first 5 minutes, right? Why did we start with this question, 2 questions and poll, right? Imagine you all would be walking in and you're sitting in for 10 minutes. Sure, you'll be enjoying the nice music, maybe the poll, and watching some slides. But then the moment you got into that questions, even if you did not answer, somebody else answering got you into action, right? So that's the number one. So to some extent, you think about, how do I choreograph, right? And number 2, ask yourself, do I really have to teach in the lifetime? For example, virtual classroom gives you this combination of asynchronous and synchronous, right? What we, in our parlance, we used to call it flipped classroom, right? So in essence, what content can I move it to the offline? For example, I do a class on Porter's analysis, or I'll tell you the much more complex one, the resource-based view of the firm. And I sort of create one. In fact, a lot of content is available on YouTube, right? When a public information, when you think it's a good tube available, you don't need to recreate something. So I put 2 YouTube clip on VRIO model, and then I just give them a 2 minutes conversation on how to apply it. And so all these are done offline. So when I walk into the classroom, I can straight away go to the Jamboard and say, okay, we're going to do Southwest Airlines. So what are the resources in the stuff? So why don't you guys fill up this room fill up this board with the resources? So first is how do you start, and what content goes offline and what content is real time? And the third one, and the most important one, is how do you land the plane, right? In a virtual classroom, you have to land the plane carefully, right? You can't abruptly leave it in the air and hope that the passengers will fly off, get off the plane, right? You have to land the plane, get them where we had been, and you tell them like, okay, we want to walk through this 1, 2, 3. My closing slide, if you remember, the 3E, how it circulates, right? So that's what the content we did today, my friends. And perhaps if I had the next class, I would say we are going to go. So landing the plane. So those are the 3 things you should carefully choreograph when you are moving from offline to, from in class to the stuff. And that's basically easy to do. It's a one-time investment that you will do, and it can pay back huge. Thank you.
Fantastic. And in relation to that, now you mentioned synchronous, asynchronous, and we have exactly the question about that. So if we have 100% asynchronous teaching, in your opinion, is it possible to reach the energy? Is it possible to reach engagement? And then what would be your tips for having that?
Yeah. See, this is one of the challenges of the MOOC and stuff, right? When you're dealing with math classes, we don't deal with students, and then it's all like algorithm-driven stuff. That's a different issue, right? Let me deal with an issue that we are dealing with. Let's assume that we are dealing totally asynchronous class. I taught a class like that in Indiana University. The students were from coast to coast, literally from California to New York, right? So we had this series of sessions on green capitalism and stuff. And what I found was students were longing to connect, right? So if you were teaching an asynchronous class, in fact, this is a real thing that happened. One student said, you know what, there are 3 students with my postal code. We are planning to meet in New York City, and we're going to meet once in a while and have a conference, right? The kind of conversation, right? So having this synchronous, what you call the groups that can once in a while meet face to face. That's one possibility, if it is possible at all, right? The other one is having a few live time for students to meet you. Not all the class will show up, right? But those that feel that the synchronous matters will show up. For example, just you say, okay, once in 2 weeks, I'm going to hold an office hour from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. You can sign in, and you Zoom, you just give them the call. And if they don't sign, nobody signs up, you can keep doing what you are doing, and they just show up. Hey, there's only one student shows up, and this literally happens. Like only 1 or 2 students will show up in the first week, and you send out a message. Oh, it was very nice to meet Tamara and Austrian one-on-one and stuff. And then suddenly the next week, 4 people show up. Right, so that it takes some time to module. So that's something that you can develop, right? So there are 2 things that you are satisfying, right? One is our own needs for connection, right? As a teacher, I want to be connected with the students with whom I'm teaching. So it's nice to close the loop. And the second one, your students also have the same need for connection. So creating that avenues that you can work with, even though it is not required by your school or by your institution. And that's where I would go.
Fantastic. One probably comment on my behalf, because I do teach a lot asynchronously. I do record them videos and sort of addresses briefly and send it out once in a while, and sort of that gives a feedback back. And I noticed also that sending quite emotional emails really helps engaging them. Some personal comments or about something about yourself, that's also quite helpful to engage. Now, running into the hybrid classes, how to deal with that? What would be your tips on handling the flow and energy and orchestra there?
Yeah, Tiffany, that's a great question. To me, We call it high flex. There are quite a few terminologies that are going on. How do we create classrooms where 50-50 or partially in, partially what I call near side and the far side, right? Now, number one, you need good technology, right? A lot of schools focus a lot on screens and video, but the real thing that matters is audio, right? Even where the neuroscience work on the McMaster University is doing some work, great work on concert hall effects and stuff. And their discovery is the audio pretty much dictates how the participants' emotions are, right? So you have to make sure the classroom invests in good audio. Now, these days, the STEM audio and the type of technology that is available, it's very good, right? And then teaching students how to use it, near side and the far side, right? So you build certain terminology so that they can think about the classroom is constantly aware of the other side, right? Because it's very hard for them to think of the other side. So you have to, I mean, the large screen setup is a good one, but you have to sort of create some type of activities. That's where choreographing it in a hybrid class, you sort of say, okay, we are going to move to the upside and far side now, and we are going to come to the near side now. So moving back and forth between far side and the near side can create that feeling of oneness, right? I'll tell you this. 2 weeks back, we had a class for our PhD students, ePhD students. We had about 15 students. 7 are in class and 8 are offline. And we went from 9 o'clock to 5 o'clock. At the end of the day, I asked them questions. Okay, how did you feel about, I mean, being distributed inline and fall line? No way, the feeling was fantastic. And the same thing I repeated with the far side. Did you guys feel that you were monotonous and stuff? No, right? So you can create that seamless continuity, but three things you need. One, you need a technology. You have to ask your institution to make sure the classroom is well equipped. Often, deans don't put enough attention on that. So you have to fight for it. If they ask you to teach in a high flex, ask them for the best technology and make sure audio is a part of it. Number two, choreograph it and consciously go back and forth. And three, I typically have one ambassador local and one ambassador far side so that anytime you are not getting conscious, they can pull you up. Like somebody from the far side can send a message to the near side ambassador, hey, something is going on. Can you just warn the professor? Because sometimes you may not be sensing about it. So with these three, I have found you can manage a high flex well.
Excellent. And you mentioned now the audio. There is a question about the cameras and the bandwidth of internet. And actually, a lot of students are bringing the issue that if we have big class and a lot of cameras on, the bandwidth is not handling. What would be your tip on that?
See, to me, there are two. One is real issue, and two is what I call assumed perceptive issue, right? In most cases, if you are living in Western Europe, in United States, or for that matter, even parts of cities in India or China, internet is not a problem. See, as long as you have 1 megabyte plus, you are in a very good safe, right? What you need is a good stable connection, and quite often the what I call, now I am connected to you using my hardwired connection, right? If you are if students are connecting on Wi-Fi, which is what happens most of the time, Wi-Fi can vary anywhere from 200 to 200 kilobytes is stuff. So when it drops off, because if they are sitting in Starbucks and trying to join a class, they are not going to have a great experience, right? So you have to sort of see, this is, if they don't have that internet capacity, that's something you have to ask yourself. Okay, can you guys move to a place where you can get? If your bedroom is not the best place, you should find a best place. So they can run the speed and check. They should be able to do it. So to some extent, push the ownership on students to have a minimal connection. And with Zoom, you don't need what I call very sophisticated internet. If you have a baseline good fiber connection, you are pretty good. You can make the good connection happen.
Excellent. We have to keep our promise, Osreen and Charles, and limit it to 1 hour, and it's almost the hour. But thank you so much for your inspiration, Charles, and and for your facilitation, Allstream. This has been another very rewarding, very educational webinar, and there's a lot of praise there for you for the resources you shared also. I'll remind everybody, some 150 people joined us today. I'll remind them that Charles' PowerPoints will be mailed to you, and the entire recording will be available on our Georgia State Cyber website, as well as the YouTube website. And I understand, Allstream, now you'll be posting these on your own website as well.
Very
so that's
soon, yeah.
great. We thank everybody who joined us today. We'll keep the chat line another live for another 10 minutes or so. So if Charles and Allstream, if you have time, you can respond to some of the other questions. But stay tuned for next week's webinar, which will be also on teaching. And in this case, we'll be talking about case development and case teaching. With that, have a good rest of your day. And thank you for joining us. Look forward to seeing you at another joint Cyber AIB Teaching and Education SIG webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Tamer. This was good. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you. That was great.
Thank you, Astrid. That was wonderful. So I hope I
Thank
didn't give too long answers.
Oh
so.
no, Charles, we
Um,
could listen to you forever. I mean, you're such an energy bomb. That was awesome. That was great. And I mean, there are so many questions. I have two pages of questions still there. So I don't know how I'm gonna deal with that, but
no,
but
what if it is possible to pull the questions together, then I can sort of create a quick answer, like like we can do an FQ, frequently asked questions, FAQ
yes,
type.
absolutely. I'll try to do that.
Yeah, Tamer, thank you. Thanks for this, setting this up.
You're welcome. Take care.
Yeah.
Take care.
Thank you. Yeah.